This wedding was an assignment for my Religion 2 class in Catholic school.
This one's wife. Did Joe Giuliano's family reject Meghan? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. This one's wife is a middle range type A somatic narcissist. As a somatic narcissist, she utilizes sex as a major method of seduction and control. She has had a lot of intimate partners. Some of those will have been one-night stands, ships in the night, a short tryst or liaison. In other instances, it was part of a relationship. The marriage to Trevor Engelson, who was utilised for his contacts in the industry in an attempt for her to further her career, a residual benefit. She had a go at Rory McIlroy, who didn't bite. She moved on to Corey Vitiello, utilising him by way of character trait acquisition to claim that she was a foodie, and the residual benefit of his contacts in the Toronto scene. There was the suggestion that she attempted to ensnare a married hockey player, which he rejected her. And then came Prince Harry, as her narcissism couldn't believe its luck as she landed a prince of the realm, which catapulted her to international infamy and wealth. There are other relationships that have been mentioned in respect of, I think, one who was a porn star, and, of course, allegations that she has had a bit of playing hide the sausage with none other than Prince Andrew. There's also another name that regularly gets thrown into the mix, and that is of Joe Giuliano, a man who is a criminal defence attorney. There are those that suggest that the two don't know one another, less even met one another. However, regularly it's suggested that they were boyfriend and girlfriend, even more so, that they were actually married and that they had a child together, which this one's wife has nothing to do with, and that the marriage was annulled essentially because the family disapproved of this one's wife. Is this the case? Well, it's stated that before the world ever heard the name This One's Wife, there was Joe Giuliano. He wasn't a prince, he wasn't famous, he was her first husband. What began as a whirlwind teenage love story quickly turned into one of the quietest erasers in celebrity history. Because according to those close to Joe's family, although they're not named, what they saw behind closed doors was enough to make them end it and make sure the world never found out. Sources, although they're unnamed, claim the Giulianos were shocked by this one's wife's behaviour, her obsession with status, her cold ambition, and her willingness to manipulate the people closest to her. Well, all of that is accurate descriptions of a narcissist, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's been provided by sources close to the Giulianos. You would know that about this one's wife by virtue of her being a narcissist. The family, deeply traditional and protective, rejected her completely, and before the marriage could even find its footing, it was over. The records were sealed, the family disappeared, and this one's wife moved on as if Joe Giuliano never existed. But now, after nearly 3 decades of silence, word from inside the Giuliano circle is surfacing, and it's painting a picture of this one's wife that she never wanted the world to see. It talks about that she was a young woman standing in a small Las Vegas chapel beside a man named Joe Giuliano, that there were just 2 people exchanging vows, that it was a real private union that ended just as quietly as it began. Within months, the papers were filed, sealed, and hidden away. No one was ever meant to know. But the question still echoes. Why would a simple young marriage, if that's all it was, need to be erased? Why the secrecy, the legal silence, the disappearance of every trace? Well, this is assuming there was something to erase, because so far no actual evidence has been provided that that is what has occurred, just speculation that that's what has happened. It might be that nothing exists because nothing exists. There was nothing there in the first place. Apparently, this woman that he brought into his life wasn't just another young wife. She was already planning something much bigger. And Joe's family, people known for their quiet values and tight-knit loyalty, saw through her from the start. The Giulianos began noticing little things that didn't quite fit. Dates that shifted, school years that didn't line up, a story that changed depending on who was listening. Again, no actual evidence is being provided as to who's saying all of this, and these are, of course, facts that are known in relation to this one's wife as a consequence of behaviours that have been witnessed, but not necessarily in relation to the Giulianos. According to one family acquaintance, who is unnamed, Joe's mother grew suspicious when this one's wife mentioned a graduation year that didn't match public records. She said she finished in '94, the source recalled, but the documents and her own classmates placed it years later. At first, they brushed it off as a mistake, but the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. Some records suggested she was older than she claimed, possibly born in the mid to late 1970s, not 1981. Again, this is regurgitating the oft-cited rumour about her lying about her age. If true, this would mean she wasn't the young, naive girl she pretended to be when she met Joe. She was older, calculated, experienced. To Joe's parents, that realisation changed everything. The charming woman their son fell for suddenly felt like a stranger. Someone hiding behind a story. Someone who could look you in the eye and make you believe every word, even when it didn't add up. They couldn't trust her, said one insider. Not because of what she said, but because she was too good at saying it. Behind her smile, they saw control. Behind her charm, they saw strategy. And in that quiet Chicago household, the Giulianos began to whisper what would later become their unspoken truth. This one's wife wasn't who she said she was. It then goes on to talk about what the Giulianos were and their standards and the fact that they would gather around the table for dinner every Sunday, and that she brought something foreign to them when she came into their lives, basically ambition, talking about Los Angeles auditions, that she wanted fame, that it was a mission. She didn't talk about family, said one family friend. She talked about opportunity. Joe's parents began to worry. They saw a woman who wanted the world, not a home. They believed she was using Joe as a stepping stone. Again, that is the behaviour of the narcissist, of course, to use people. So it's no major revelation to explain all of that. They explained that they decided that they were going to protect their son. That she wasn't a daughter-in-law, she was simply a visitor passing through. It talks about the views that they had in relation to marriage and how this one's wife's views didn't accord with all of that. At first it was simple things that happened. This one's wife would miss family dinners. She would skip calls from Joe Giuliano's mother and was spending more time in Los Angeles than in Chicago. But then they began to see her ambition as a threat to their son's peace. She didn't want roots. When she spoke about acting, modelling or travelling, Joe's father told her that's not what marriage is, but this one's wife didn't agree. She wanted to be seen. Then, according to several accounts close to the Giuliano family, none of which are named, this one's wife discovered she was pregnant just months after the Las Vegas ceremony. This, of course, would be cause for celebration anywhere else, but given the circumstances, this was problematic. And the Giulianos, not believing in scandal and not believing in leaving family matters to strangers, so they decided that they would take steps whereby they would raise the child and this one's wife would move on. There would be no paperwork, no announcements, no public record. By mid-1995, a baby girl was reportedly born. She never appeared in the press, never attended public schools under the mother's name, and never once used the Markle surname. Neighbours in Chicago record a little girl at Giuliano family gatherings, introduced only as a relative's child, never fully explained and never discussed again. This one's wife was gone. She left for college, for auditions, for the life she'd always wanted. And in doing so, she left behind a family that never forgave her. To them, it wasn't just abandonment, it was betrayal. The Giulianos had offered her everything: family, faith, a place to belong. And in their eyes, she traded all of that for ambition. As one friend of Joe's put it, she didn't walk away from him, she walked away from motherhood. When the marriage finally ended, it didn't explode, it disappeared. No divorce records, no public arguments, no scandal, just an annulment quietly filed, immediately sealed and locked away from public view. Sources familiar with the Giulianos claim the separation came with one condition: silence. This one's wife would pursue her future free of the family name. The Giulianos would raise the child and protect the story from ever surfacing. And both sides would promise in writing never to speak again. It wasn't a bribe, it was a burial, a way to erase an entire chapter before the world could even read it. Some suggest that money exchanged hands. Others believe that this one's wife wanted the record sealed to protect her image before she entered Northwestern University. Either way, the result was the same: a clean slate, a vanished marriage, a child that legally never existed. And thus, that is what is said to have come to pass, that in effect, that they didn't actually truly reject her, but rather that they saw through her behaviours and were not impressed by that, and basically allowed her to move on, which she readily did. This story comes courtesy of a channel called Hollywood Top Stories, and this evidence, in inverted commas, has been viewed at least 81,000 times already, with a few hundred comments demonstrating that people accept it. All it does is simply regurgitate a rumour about this one's wife, which hasn't been demonstrated with any actual evidence. As you know, I'm no defender of this one's wife, but what I do is encourage people to always look for evidence. This video purports to tell us that Joe Giuliano himself reveals why his family rejected this one's wife. It does nothing of the sort. We don't hear from Joe Giuliano at all. Instead, it's a reasonably well-written but cobbled together account of things that are already known about this one's wife in relation to her behaviour, demonstrating various facets of her narcissism, which are accurate, but then are being applied in a manner to a supposed relationship with Joe Giuliano. It might be the case that she had a relationship with Joe Giuliano. It might be the case that they were married and they might have had a child together. But this video doesn't offer any evidence whatsoever to prove any of those things. It's simply a retelling of rumours. And the problem with this is twofold. That people lack critical thinking, so the retelling of a rumour becomes in their mind a fact when it actually doesn't provide anything evidence-based whatsoever. I'm not suggesting that these things didn't necessarily happen. They might have done, they might not have done. But this video doesn't prove it one way or the other. All it does is recount a rumour. That's it. And furthermore, as you know, this type of material plays into the hands of this one's wife and her eternal victimhood, where she points at the liars and the speculators on the internet and looks to shut them down and to claim that she is bullied. Once again, another instance of a video created that purports to tell us something, and another opportunity for me to highlight the lack of that actual evidence and how important it is to ensure that you look for evidence in relation to these things. There's plenty that this one's wife does, supported by evidence, that attracts legitimate criticism. And those, desperate for clicks and views, that pump out material which isn't based on anything, just allows this one's wife to cry victim and her supporters to state, look at all these deranged haters making stuff up about her again. They are, in effect, own goals. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.